Well, hello and welcome to the Snapdragon Studio YouTube site. My name's Jane and today I'm talking about abandoned craft projects. The reason that this is this week's topic is that when I gave the About Time Masterclass last week, and you can get that as a limited time replay right up to the end of June 2025. The link is underneath here. But when I gave that masterclass, so many of the comments in the chat were about abandoned projects and people feeling that they never finished anything and the guilt and shame that came with that. So I thought that today I would unpack that a little bit, because I think that's a very one-sided and negative way of looking at works in progress, whereas there is a different way to kind of consider them. So the first thing that I want to think about is, oh, come here, sorry, my dog, how common this is. I would say that 75%, 80% of my friends would describe themselves as people who don't finish things. They have this idea in their head that they have no discipline, that they have no grit, that they are wishy-washy, that they start all kinds of things and never actually settle into doing anything. Now, I would say from the outside, it doesn't look like that. They look like they finished lots of things, but in their heads, there is this voice that says, it's not worth starting because you never finish anything. And as soon as people start hearing these kind of negative, when they put the negative comments on themselves, or whether they would describe themselves to people as, oh, you know, I just never finish anything. I always think that it's probably something that was instilled during childhood by an authority figure or society. It doesn't have to have been anybody meaning to be nasty. It can just be like the general societal feel. And most of my friends are like me, and they grew up in the 60s, 70s, early 80s. And that was a time, sort of like this period of about 50 years, where having a job for life was really venerated. There was this idea that you would start really early, you would decide age, 16, 17, 18, exactly what you wanted to be. Then you would train for that job, you would go into that job, and you would stick at that job, working your way up the company or institution or whatever until, 40, 50 years on, you got the gold watch. And this was really common between sort of 1920 and 1990, I think. And it was the safe way of working. It was the secure way of working. It was the way that people wanted their children to get jobs, because it would be secure and it would be safe, and you want your children to be secure and safe. So all through this time, we get a veneration for sticking with things, for finishing things, and we get a culture of the importance of finishing, even if what you started turned out to be a mistake. So I see this in my own life. I, aged 17, decided that I wanted to be a museum curator or art gallery curator, and I went to study art history, and then I went to study museum management, and I got lots of internships and voluntary jobs, which is what you had to do, and I got a job as a curator of British art for Glasgow University. And this was the kind of progression, and my parents were really pleased. There I was, nice institution, good secure job, relatively well paid, high status, perfect. Unfortunately, It turned out that I really didn't like the job. I hate office politics. I get far too involved in it. It takes up a lot of space and energy in my head. I loved the collection, but I didn't particularly love the work. It turned out that I am not very good at being told what to do when I don't agree with it. And it was not the right job for me. So after 5-6 years, I left that job. And to be honest, I should probably have left earlier for myself, but it had got so bad I didn't want to get another museum job. I decided that I would retrain completely, and I retrained in horticulture, and I wanted to become a gardener, a market gardener, and it turned out that I was a grower of cut flowers. And that really worried my parents, my dad particularly, because here I was giving up a secure job, giving up a PhD, which again was something that he felt had been, like really sensible, really a good idea, and starting again right from scratch, working for myself, doing something that was definitely not secure, definitely not well paid. And all of his worries came to the surface, and he was very, very disappointed in me. But that is not how I see it at all. I see it as having had the opportunity to look at what I enjoyed, look at what I really was dragging me down. I mean, can you imagine? After 5 years, I was very much out of love with my job. Can you imagine what I would be like in 40 years? But to have the curiosity and the courage and the gumption to get out of that and to start something new. And I am much from more with the culture of starting things, the excitement and the energy and that whole kind of exploration and the way that your brain has to work and the way that you have to vision things and so on. So in the world of work, and that is what I have done. And then every 4 or 5 years since then, I have tacked my job from one direction to another. So I grew cut flowers, and then when I stopped doing that, I had a crafts business, big sort of retail, wholesale crafts business, and then I moved on to having an online community with the Studio Club, and that is where I am. And that has changed a lot since it started in 2016, but it's very different from where I started with cut flowers. So I have changed and changed and changed. And some people would say she never sticks at anything, She keeps changing jobs. They're different fields, It's she starts something and she stops it. But that's not how I see it. I see it in the culture of starting things and giving them your best. So how does this kind of relate to all of those projects that we have stuffed in cupboards and drawers? Well, I think that the starting of a project, it has a particular energy. It has a lot of curiosity. It has, you're excited to start it. And I think that that's a really good thing. And sometimes those projects do not live up to what you hoped. And that's not great. But to use your time to continue with those projects when you know that they turned out just not to be what you thought. You might wanted to have become a stained glass maker, but when you try the technique, it's just not for you. And you just want to get out. You want to abandon the project. And that is fine. I will come back to at the end what I think we should do about all of these abandoned projects, which is more to the point, really. But the second thing that I want to talk about is sunk costs. And again, looking back to my parents and my career, all they saw when I changed career was how much effort and time and energy and money I had put into training as an art gallery curator. And that moving on to do gardening, that meant that that was all a waste. That's not how I see it, surprisingly. And at the time I did think, well, you know, that's unfortunate. But I am no longer an art gallery curator. I don't need all of this stuff. But anybody who follows my YouTube channel or is a member of the studio knows that so many of those art gallery skills came with me to my present job. They melded with the being able to grow things, being curious about nature, and turned into something different. So I love art. I love social history even more. The idea of being able to read people's letters and diaries and see their work and imagine ourselves back in their time. That is a big part of what I do now. So if you go back and you look at the videos about rag rugs or about Teresa Garwood or about Barbara Hepworth, all of the art history is there. All of the art sensibilities, the kind of things about composition or materials, they're all in my work. You know, it's just that they are reimagined, made more unusual, made much more interesting by where I am now. So if we look at our abandoned projects in exactly the same way, and we have this sort of culture of starting and a culture of seeing the sunk costs not as a complete waste, but as something that has added something to us, a skill, knowledge, even if it's just knowing that you do not like that technique. It doesn't matter so much that it's not finished. It has brought something to the party. It has given you skills. It's given you insight. It's fed your curiosity. So the third thing I want to talk about is guilt and shame. And this comes from the two things. It comes from the societal conditioning that the most important thing is finishing, and it comes from the over attachment to sunk costs. The guilt and shame of having wasted time, energy, money, resources, everything comes into this. And having guilt and shame around your creativity is not a good idea. Having guilt and shame overwhelm you when you open the cupboard and there's all of these half-finished projects, that's not a good thing, because it puts this voice into your head that goes, there's no point in starting anything because I never finish. It puts the voice in your head that is, I am not a creative person, which you absolutely are. So anything that we can do to get rid of that guilt and shame is the thing to do. It is the most important thing to do. This is why in the studio club for July and August, so over the summer, we're kind of having a bit of a break from structured tutorials, and instead we are going to be bringing our worst works in progress to the table to show them off, to think about what it is that we can do, either to rescue them or to fall back in love with them or to pass them on, or just maybe to get rid of some of them. I mean, it's a bit like when you are decluttering your wardrobe and you've got to think about, is there any point in storing these things, or can they be adapted, or can they be passed on, can they go to charity shops or whatever? And I was thinking about this because in the First World War, there was a realization that very injured soldiers who were bedbound could be entertained by doing embroidery. It would be something that they could do that would keep interest, that they would feel that they were actually making progress. But obviously there was not sort of like massive budgets to buy all of these embroidery threads and so on. So instead, notices went into embroidery magazines saying that, like a call out for unfinished projects. All of those things in the cupboards and the drawers, if you had like half finished tray cloths and threads, could they be delivered to whoever was organising? I can't remember if it was the Red Cross or the WI, but there was a group organising this, and they were overwhelmed by the number of things that came in to their sorting spaces so that they could put together kits for injured soldiers to make in bed. And I think that just shows it's not a modern problem, it's not our problem. And often these things, when we just see ourselves, we think, oh, I'm the only person who doesn't finish things, rather than getting together somewhere like the Studio Club or with friends or here and saying, actually, no, it is a really, really, really common problem. So my thing that I am going to be taking to the table in the Studio Club is the heirloom quilt cardigan, which I have talked about a lot here. I talked about very enthusiastically when I started it, because I was using all of these plant dyed cottons that I had. But then when I got it sort of like almost made up, so this is like 7/8 of it done, I just discovered that I really didn't like the inside looking like that. I didn't like all of these seams. And I knew that I would never wear it. So at that point, it kind of got dumped into a bag in a cupboard and has been looking at me ever since. And I've just been feeling, I really should have done that, because I was really enthusiastic about it and I used up all of these precious bits of cotton. So I'm going to be taking that to our kind of rescue centre in the studio, and I'm going to be unpicking it all, so I get it all back to squares like this, and then I'm going to make it up into something else, which is likely to be a blanket, because I like the designs of the squares. I just wouldn't have knitted a cardigan with all of those patchy bits, because I know that it will irritate me and I won't wear it. So that is what I am taking. And if you want to join us in the studio, all the details are underneath here. It's £15 a month, but there are also supported places if you can't afford that. And it would be lovely to see you there. And next week I will be here on Friday, and I would love to see you there. And do comment underneath here and let me know, what is your worst, longest standing work in progress? Because I think it will do us all a lot of good to know that everybody has abandoned projects, and it's not a sign of being flaky or lacking discipline. It is a sign of having creativity and courage and curiosity and being able to see ourselves making wonderful things. So until next Friday, bye bye.